Hello and welcome to 18 WJTS-Inform. Well, it's Friday and time for a weekly visit from State Senator Mark Messmer of District 48, for Indiana. And Mark, we really appreciate you coming in every Friday to talk about what's happened in the Senate and a little bit about what happened in the House for this past week and what's to look forward to next week. Now, did anything get done this week? Did we have some things?
Actually, yeah, we've been pretty busy on the Senate side. I think the House is still in the process of filing bills in committee, which was one of the things that always kind of was a little irritating when I was on the House side. It takes so long to get the bills assigned to committees that you have such a compressed schedule the last 2 weeks. We got 35 bills out of committee this week. 13 of them have already been through the amending process this week on the floor and will be eligible for final passage. 2 have already had final passage. One of them being Senate Bill 200, which is the I-STEP. There's 2 bills dealing with I-STEP issues. One pauses the school grading impact, and the other pauses the teacher pay impact.
Well, it seemed odd to me. Why did we have 2 bills? Why not just make it all one bill dealing with I-STEP?
That's a great question, Bill. Because the 2 Education Committee chairmen have too big of an ego to let the other guy take all the credit.
One wants credit and the other wants credit.
Yeah.
Okay, so split it up.
They
one
split it up.
Okay.
Yeah. So
there really was no argument.
Oh no.
I mean, it was.
They both passed out of the House Bill 1003 passed out of the House. I don't know if it was Thursday last week or Tuesday this week or Monday, like 99-1, and Senate Bill 200 passed out of the House 48-1. So, not sure what was up with the 2 guys that each voted no, but who knows?
Well, somebody has to vote. now.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So we will do final passage of House Bill 1003 on Tuesday. We're off on Monday for Martin Luther King Day, but when we get back in Tuesday, that's on the calendar for final passage. And one will pause the impact, the lowering of I-STEP grades, which everybody anticipated because we changed the test standard and to the new No Child Left Behind standards. We're not a No Child Left Behind state, but we're in essence, we're not one in name, but we are one in function. And
that would be because there's still federal money tied to that, to education in a way?
Yes.
Okay.
So all of that Common Core, we still have to comply with the rules. Okay. So anyway, everybody anticipated when we changed the test mechanism, there'd be a drop in scores. We weren't sure how wide-ranging it would be. And rather than have the average score drops, 20 points, rather than let us establish a new baseline, the federal government said, oh no, you can't do that. Well, they didn't tell us, what we had to do with the scores. So they won't let us set a new baseline when we change test standards, which would have been, the logical thing to do. But they didn't tell us what we had to do with those scores. So we're going to put a pause in impact, how they impact school grades, the A through F, and we're going to put a pause on, on how that then rolls into any teacher evaluations. And each of those bills, Senate Bill 200 and House Bill 1003, one deals with the teachers, one deals with the schools. And then next year we'll have a new baseline because we've paused how they impacted folks. If you got an A last year and you dropped to a B this year, you still get an A. Now we did write it that if you got a B last year and you got an A this year, you get the A. You get the higher of the scores. But then next year when we start comparing this year's scores to last year's scores, we'll have then in essence a new baseline set. Okay. So just if the federal government would have just been a little bit logical and said, yeah, you can do like the other 13 states have felt the same impact and let you reset your average grade, none of this would have been necessary, but they're not usually the most cooperative folks. So those are steaming along like I thought they would, and I'm sure we might have one vote against House Bill 1003 on Tuesday, but they'll both be done and on the governor's desk by the end of the week next week.
Okay. What are other bills people might want to watch for?
Probably the biggest bill we've got up for amending on Tuesday and would probably be final passage, probably one of the most pressing bills, the Senate Bill 67. That's the giving local units of government about $430 million of local road funding money. It's not It's not dealing with tax rates on fuel or any of that. It's just taking some reserve money, that we had, that was in some local government accounts for local option income taxes, and giving them a one-time distribution, and they have to spend 75% of that on roads, either this year, or they have to hold it back for road work, and then 25%, they can spend other ways, or they could spend it all on roads if they need it. And I think the city of Jasper will be about $1 million. Huntingburg will be about $400,000. Du Bois County as a whole gets about $3 million. So, of each county's total, it gets split based on how many people live in the cities and how many live outside of the cities. And in Jasper, it's about 50-50, that are in incorporated cities, and 50% live outside. So the county is going to get a $1 million, $1.5 million more for county roads, and the cities will get, Jasper and Huntingburg and Ferdinand will each get a good little shot as well.
So this is money that's really just been sitting and not been used, and you're authorizing the counties and the cities to use that money.
The way the local option income taxes are collected, each year you collect it in the current year, and then you pay next year based on what they took in this year, but you end up paying it based on after returns are filed in April. So you're kind of always lagging a little bit behind. And once those accounts, if Jasper accumulated $1 million in taxes each year, once their reserve built up to $500,000 in their reserve account, they could request distributions from that. Historically, we found that that large of a buffer is not necessary, and so we're gonna go to all those accounts across the state and let them basically go down to a lower buffer. We'll continue then, but some like last year, if Jasper only collected $900,000, but their payments, because their in arrear was $1 million, you'd need some reserve to pull from, and rather than the state make up those those shortfalls when there was a dip down, or it just allowed for them to be excess money in there, for a year when there might have been a change in, how much local taxes were collected versus what was need to be paid.
And this is in the Senate, so it'll then go to the House.
Go to the
Is
House.
that right? Okay.
Yep, and that bill, that'll probably see final passage, next week. I don't know that the House will accelerate that when it's not that pressing, that the teacher evaluation and school grading bills, we need to get that done, because until we get that finalized, then, as far as teacher evaluations and school, all that needs to get moving along for this school year. So we accelerated those two bills, and that's probably the biggest high-profile bill we'll have on the floor this week. This also was the week that constitutionally the governor and the Supreme Court Chief Justice need to give the State of the State address and the State of the Judiciary addresses on Tuesday and Wednesday. So that takes up a little bit of our time during week 2 of our session, but they're required to do it, so we let them do it.
Got to allow for that time.
Yep, and the governor just gave a nice highlight of where we were, as of at the end of 2015. The state of the state as a whole, whether it's economy, jobs, roads. It was a nice recap of really what kind of progress we've made. Last year in our budget, we did the largest increase in K through 12 school funding in the state's history. We're spending at the highest level we ever have. We were actually in our budget prior to that, we had gotten up to pre-recession levels, and did about 450 million more. Yeah, I had to make sure. Yeah, in this current budget than the prior budget, and just reiterated what we've done on road funding the last few years. We have put about $1 billion more into roads the last few years. Just to get a nice recap on where we were on the state of economic and road and education issues in the state. He did point out one concern he had, I guess, the civil rights expansion for the LGBT community. He said what gives him pause, and really what gives me concern about how you craft a law that threads, what I'll call threads the needle, and in Article 1, Section 3 of our Constitution, we have religious freedoms that are much more strictly and more detailed defined than what the federal Constitution does. And in Article 3, it says the government shall pass no law that prohibits the free expression of religion, and puts any restrictions on freedom of thought or freedom of freedom of conscience. So, how you thread that needle on that issue is going to be difficult, because no matter what you do to add to the civil rights of the LGBT community, there's going to be a block of the population who's going to say, that tilts things, against not only my freedom of religion, my freedom of conscience. So it becomes a difficult issue.
Yeah, it's a thin line. It really is.
It is a very thin line. So,
will we see anything on it? Well, it may just let it go.
Well, I think those bills are assigned to the Rules Committee in the Senate, and those are bills that either where bills go to die, or where and any bills that do get a hearing in that bill are usually pretty dicey bills. And the president or the Senate leader, Senator Long, is the chairman of the Rules Committee, so it'll probably get discussed. I can't anticipate, whether it'll make it out or not. But at this point, at least there were probably some level of discussions about can that needle be threaded or not. So then Wednesday we had the state of the judiciary, and the Supreme Court justice came and gave really a nice recap. And I've been around to see a lot of these adjustments to our court system take place. And one that we started in Du Bois County, it might have been 8 to 10 years ago, we started a drug court. Mm-hmm. And more counties are setting up drug courts and veterans courts. They're basically special needs courts that they're not everywhere in every county, but we probably need to expand the courts for the veterans a little bit more, because those guys come back with post-traumatic stress disorder, and how when they're dealing with legal issues, whether they're drug addiction, the drug courts really try to step them through getting treatment for their drug problems, and try to get them handled from a corrective side of thing before they get the hammer put down on them for criminal violations. They really try to get those folks through a healing process. The veterans courts are really set up the same way. They try to have judges that really specialize in the needs of veterans who are dealing with sometimes some very traumatic issues and emotional issues and depression and other things that military service can as we've discovered in the past few decades, can really be difficult. So gave a nice recap of where those have come the last 10 years, and really great strides we've made in the court system dealing with that. And it was kind of refreshing to see some of those things that we've those special use courts and how they've been rolled out, and how they're really changing people's lives. And they had people in the in the chamber that had been through those and got their graduation certificates from drug courts, and people whose lives have been hopefully forever changed, but definitely, rather than just throw them in jail, they've gotten them treatment and treatment for addictions and other things that they're battling. So
now, let's talk about some bills. We don't have a whole lot of time
Okay.
left, but some bills that you're involved in.
Mm-hmm. I had a bill that passed out of committee this week, and one of my bills is a public policy bill that'll be heard later, and this one was a natural resources bill. When you're on the committees that deal with these, the agencies sometimes bring you problems and say, we need this fixed, and we think you're the person that needs to do it this year. But there's a entity called Deer Hunting Preserves, and they had requested permission from DNR to get set up about 15 years ago. We have deer farms, we have bird shooting preserves, but the deer hunting preserves really were nowhere in code. No rules, no laws, nothing to set them up to. And the DNR director about 15 years ago said, it's really nowhere in statute, so go ahead and then we'll try to work with you on setting up some some rules to how to operate. And they went along for about 7-8 years, and then a new director for DNR came in and said, well, they're not really in code, and so we want to stop you from operating. And then when they tried to shut down the operations, the operators went to court and got an injunction. And then at the local court level, the appeals court level, and the Supreme Court level, the deer hunting preserves have won in their suit against Department of Natural Resources. And so the Supreme Court, appeals court, said these are unregulated legal entities, fix the problem. And also in their ruling, they really put limits on DNR's ability through how they worded their ruling to issue any kind of wildlife permits if you want to raise raccoons, or any kind of wildlife, for the pelts or whatever. You have to get a wildlife ownership permit from DNR, and they said that the statutes were unclear. They wanted that whole regulatory process cleaned up. So I worked with Department of Natural Resources during the off season, and worked with the Board of Animal Health. The Board of Animal Health administered the rules and the laws for the deer farms. Okay. And those guys, there's about 400 deer farms, and they raise deer for meat consumption and then to send to deer preserves in Indiana and roughly 26, 27 other states that have them. So they administered the rules for the deer farms, and Department of Natural Resources said, let's move the whole area of deer farms and deer preserves under the Board of Animal Health because they're much more equipped to handle disease concerns, food safety issues, and all the rules that go along with that. And most of the rules there's some about the size requirements and things and time of year they can operate, but most of the rules were giving Board of Animal Health control over disease and food safety issues. So that bill got passed out of committee this week and will be moved through the Senate on amending on Tuesday, and then final passage on Thursday. So.
And then it'll go to the House.
Yep, to go to the House. And in prior years, DNR was silent on the issue because with them being tied up in court action, the governors, Daniels and Pence, both said, just stay out of it. If it moves through the legislature, fine. And if it doesn't ever get resolved while it's in court, stay silent. But they were very actively involved in trying to remedy the issue and support the bill that we're trying to get moved through. So hopefully get it through the Senate this week and off to the House next week, and then see what happens the second half of session. So.
Well, good luck with that.
There are always interesting things we get to work on.
We really appreciate you coming in and talking with us. And we want to let you know that next Saturday morning at the, I think it's at 8 a.m. or 8:30, 8 a.m.?
Might be 8:30.
Okay, the Jasper Chamber of Commerce and Vincennes University Jasper will host the two state representatives and State Senator Mark Messmer to talk in front of you and answer your questions that you might have. That's Saturday the 23rd, and also I think February the 20th. But the next one coming up is on the 23rd. We'll see you there, but we'll see you next week as part of the WJTS-In-form as the state senator comes and visits us every Friday. Again, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We have had as our guest State Senator for District 48, Mark Messmer. Thank you for watching WJTS-In-form. We're local people watching local people.